After the Federal High Court in Abuja sentenced Nnamdi Kanu to life imprisonment, the news did not stay within Nigeria. It moved fast across the world. In this fictional story, many people in the United States followed the case closely. They read reports, watched discussions, and listened to arguments from different sides. The sentence quickly became a major topic among Americans who cared about justice, freedom, and human rights. To many of them, the life sentence raised serious questions. They believed it was too heavy for a political case. They felt the punishment did not leave any room for dialogue, correction, or mercy. Some of them said that even the strongest democracies avoid life sentences in cases linked to political speech and activism. Among those concerned were lawyers, human rights advocates, and former government officials. They began private discussions. They asked why the case moved so fast to a final judgment. They asked why there was no clear effort to calm tensions or seek compromise. They also asked why calls for review were ignored. As these discussions continued, one idea became clear among them. Reading reports was not enough. Online debates were not enough. They believed the only way to understand the situation fully was to visit Nigeria themselves. Their decision was not about protest. It was not about noise or publicity. In this story, they agreed on one simple goal. They wanted to see Nnamdi Kanu. They wanted to understand the reason behind the life sentence directly from the system that gave it. They prepared quietly. No big announcements were made. They contacted the right offices and followed official steps. They made it clear that their visit was for observation and understanding, not confrontation. When they arrived in Nigeria, they expected to be taken to Abuja. After all, that was where the trial happened. That was where the sentence was given. However, they were quickly told something unexpected. They were informed that Nnamdi Kanu was no longer in Abuja custody. He had been transferred to Sokoto prison. This information surprised them deeply. In their view, it was unusual for someone sentenced in the capital to be moved so far away. Sokoto was far from Abuja, far from Kanu's home region, and far from the public eye. This raised even more questions. They asked why the transfer happened so quickly. They asked who ordered it. They asked what reason justified moving him so far from the court that sentenced him. At first, the answers were not clear. They were told it was a government decision. They were told it followed procedure. But those answers were not enough for them. They wanted a clear explanation that made sense. The Americans then made a formal request. They asked to be allowed to visit Nnamdi Kanu in Sokoto prison. They said seeing him would help them understand the condition he was being held in and the seriousness of the situation. The request moved through different offices. It took time. There were delays. But eventually, permission was granted. Before traveling to Sokoto, the Americans asked for one more thing. They wanted to speak directly with the judge who handled the case. They believed the judge was the best person to explain both the sentence and the prison transfer. That request led them to Judge Omotosho. For the Americans, this meeting was important. They believed that hearing directly from the judge would remove rumors and assumptions. They wanted facts, not stories. As they prepared for the meeting, their expectations were mixed. Some believed the judge would defend the sentence strongly. Others believed he might admit that pressure played a role. But above all, they wanted honesty. The reason for their visit, in their own words, was simple. They said a life sentence is final. It ends hope. It closes doors forever. They said before such a sentence is accepted by the world, it must be clearly understood. They also said the case had already created strong emotions. Protests, arguments, and anger were spreading. They believed silence would only make things worse. They believed clarity was necessary. This is why the Americans came. Not because they wanted to control Nigeria. Not because they wanted to insult its leaders. In this story, they came because they believed justice should always be questioned when it feels too heavy. Chapter 1 ends with the Americans standing at the door of authority, waiting for answers, carrying questions that would soon shape the next stage of the story. The meeting with Judge Omotosho was calm and formal. The Americans sat quietly as the judge began to speak. He did not rush his words. He did not show anger. He spoke as someone who wanted his position to be clearly understood. He started by explaining his role. He said his duty was to apply the law as it was presented before the court. He said he did not act based on public pressure, foreign opinions, or emotions. According to him, the court followed legal steps from the beginning of the case to the final judgment. He then addressed the life sentence directly. He said the court believed the charges against Nnamdi Kanu were serious under the law used in the trial. He said the prosecution presented the case as a threat to national order and security. He said the court accepted that argument and applied the strongest punishment allowed. The judge explained that a life sentence, in his view, was not meant to silence political ideas, but to respond to what the court saw as repeated violations of the law. He said the judgment was based on the materials placed before him, not personal feelings. After that, he moved to the issue that confused the Americans the most: the transfer of Nnamdi Kanu from Abuja to Sokoto prison. Judge Omotosho said the transfer was not ordered by the court itself, but approved within the legal system. He said that after the sentencing, security agencies advised that keeping Kanu in Abuja could lead to serious problems. He said there were fears of unrest, protests, and possible attacks on the facility. According to him, Abuja had become too sensitive. He said too many eyes were on the prison. He said too many groups were interested in what happened there. He explained that the authorities believed a quieter location would reduce tension. He said Sokoto prison was chosen because it was considered more secure and less exposed to public pressure. He said the goal was to prevent chaos, not to add suffering. He insisted that the move was not meant to punish Kanu further. The Americans listened carefully. They asked why Sokoto, which was far from Kanu's home region and family. The judge answered that distance was part of the security plan. He said separating the prisoner from areas of strong emotional support could reduce unrest. He admitted that such decisions can feel harsh. However, he said the system often chooses control over comfort when security is involved. The judge also spoke about the criticism coming from outside Nigeria. He said foreign reactions were expected. He said high-profile cases always attract global attention. However, he stressed that courts must not bend to external pressure. He told them clearly that the court could not release Nnamdi Kanu simply because other countries disagreed with the sentence. He said the law must follow its own path. One of the Americans asked if the sentence could ever be reviewed. Judge Omotosho paused before answering. He said the law allows appeals and reviews under certain conditions. He said if new legal steps were taken, the system would respond as required. He did not promise freedom. He did not promise change. He only said the law was not completely closed. He also addressed claims that the judgment was meant to send a message. He said every court decision sends a message, whether intended or not. He said in this case, the message was that the state would not tolerate actions it believed threatened national stability. The Americans noted his words. They did not argue. They did not interrupt. Their purpose was to understand, not to fight. Before the meeting ended, Judge Omotosho added one final point. He said judges are often blamed for decisions that come from larger systems. He said courts work within limits set by law and government policy. He said if people want different outcomes, they must also question the laws themselves. The room fell silent after that. The explanation did not remove all doubts, but it provided clarity. The Americans now understood the official reasons behind the life sentence and the prison transfer, even if they did not fully agree with them. As they left the meeting, one thing was clear. The case was no longer just about one man. It had become a symbol of how law, power, and security collide. Chapter 2 ends with understanding, not agreement. The judge had spoken. The law had explained itself. And the weight of the sentence still remained. After the Americans finished their visit and meetings in Nigeria, the focus shifted to two powerful figures. People wanted to hear from Donald Trump and Tinubu. Their words were expected to shape the next phase of the story. Donald Trump spoke first. In this fictional story, Trump did not hide his feelings. He said he was deeply concerned about the life sentence given to Nnamdi Kanu. He said a punishment that removes all hope from a man must be handled with extreme care. According to him, justice should correct, not destroy. Trump said clearly, a life sentence in a political case is too much. He said no government should use prison to silence voices forever. He said when politics and punishment mix without balance, the result is anger and division. He explained that this was the main reason Americans decided to visit Nigeria. He said they wanted clarity. He said they wanted to understand how a court reached such a final decision. He said the visit was not meant to disrespect Nigeria, but to ask serious questions. Trump said he listened carefully to the explanations given by Judge Omotosho. He said he understood the legal arguments, but he did not agree with the outcome. He said law must also carry wisdom. He said strict law without mercy can damage a nation. He spoke directly about the transfer to Sokoto prison. He said moving Nnamdi Kanu far away after sentencing only made the situation worse. He said it created the image of isolation and punishment without end. According to him, such actions increase tension instead of reducing it. Trump said, when you lock a man away for life and move him far from everyone, you are not solving a problem. You are planting another one. He said peace cannot be forced. He said it must be built through dialogue and fair treatment. He warned that holding Kanu for life would continue to attract global attention and pressure. Trump also addressed the idea of sovereignty. He said he respected Nigeria as a country. He said every nation has the right to run its own system. However, he added that human rights do not stop at borders. He said when a case becomes too heavy, the world will look. He ended his statement with a strong message. He said justice must always leave room for review. He said a door that is completely closed will one day be broken open by force. According to him, it is better to open it with wisdom. After Trump's words spread, attention turned to Tinubu. When Tinubu heard that Americans had visited Nigeria because of Nnamdi Kanu's life sentence, he was clearly displeased in this story. He spoke firmly. He said Nigeria was not under foreign control. He said the court had done its work and the decision must be respected. Tinubu said, Nigeria is a sovereign nation. Our courts are not guided by foreign voices. He said allowing outside pressure to influence judgments would weaken the country's authority. He responded directly to Trump's comments. He said justice must be allowed to work without threats or emotional reactions. He said the law was applied according to the case presented. He insisted that the government did not act out of hate, but out of responsibility. Tinubu also spoke about security. He said the transfer to Sokoto prison was necessary. He said the government had to think about national stability. He said decisions are not always comfortable, but they are sometimes needed to maintain order. He rejected the idea that Nnamdi Kanu was being punished beyond the law. He said the sentence came from a court, not from the presidency. He said blaming the government alone was misleading. Tinubu said the visit by Americans felt like pressure. He said Nigeria would not bend because of international attention. He said if the law allowed review, it would happen through proper channels, not because outsiders demanded it. However, his words also revealed concern. He said the government did not want Nigeria to become a place of endless conflict. He said peace was important. But he added that peace must be built on obedience to the law. Tinubu warned that allowing foreign involvement in internal cases could create dangerous precedents. He said today it is Nnamdi Kanu, tomorrow it could be another issue. He said leaders must protect their systems. The contrast between Trump and Tinubu became clear. Trump spoke from the angle of mercy and global concern. Tinubu spoke from the angle of authority and sovereignty. Both believed they were right. For the people watching, the tension grew stronger. Some agreed with Trump. They believed the life sentence was too harsh. They believed dialogue was the better path. Others agreed with Tinubu. They believed no country should allow outsiders to question its courts. Nnamdi Kanu remained at the center of everything. Even without speaking, his case continued to shape decisions and statements across continents. Chapter 3 ends without resolution. Trump continued to call for review and wisdom. Tinubu continued to defend the court and the nation's authority. The Americans returned home with answers, but not peace. The story closes with one clear truth. When justice, power, and pride collide, the silence that follows is often louder than words.